just fucking hit it! Another plane just hit it! Oh my God, Hussein! Hussein, what the hell is going on? Hussein, this is an act of sabotage! Hussein, did you see what I just saw?
One more plane going there. Man, what's wrong with these guys?
Hussein, it's got to be sabotage. Hussein, it's got to be sabotage.
Jim, I saw the plane going there and I was laughing at it.
No, it did. It just hit. Another plane just went right into it, Hussein.
Man, I saw the plane. It went into the other building.
Hussein, it sounded, my God. Hussein, this is a terrorist act. You know that, don't you?
I just thought, look at the guy who...
Hussein, I'll tell you what, Hussein, we're probably going to be there's going to be other targets all over the country today. We're being attacked, my friend. This is it.
The second plane looked like it was actually coming toward us. Very, very low. Me and him looked at each other and were like, what is going on here? And we watched the second jet tilt and make a U-turn almost directly over the building we were at. And we watched it heading toward the towers. Neither one of us could believe it. We watched, and sure enough, I was on the rooftop of the building when the second jet hit the second tower.
The second plane hit while I was inside the building, so I didn't see the second plane at all, and I knew nothing of a second plane until I went home and was watching the whole thing played out on television.
And while I was talking to him, the second plane hit, and it was a 60-story fireball that came at me, and it was astounding, and I couldn't speak, and so I just said, I have to call you up, and turn the phone off, and I think I couldn't hardly make any phone calls after that, because then my phone went dead.
And the plane hit right in our 4 floors. I think that my friend, based on the facts that I know, and some personal facts I don't want to talk about because his wife told me, but he was instantly hit. He was at his desk, and when the plane hit, so I think it was instantaneous. There was no,
When we were watching the screen when the second tower was struck, and that's when people really started freaking out, but in a really organized way, in a way of, I need to get out of here. I would rather take my chances somewhere else than to just be a sitting duck. And that was really the mentality.
By this time here, the second plane does hit. We know it's an act of terrorism, and it takes on a whole new complexion at this particular time.
But I can assume that out of the many things that I felt and heard, there were a series of them that probably took place around 9:03. The ground shuddered. The building groaned like I have never heard it groan before. And I get another radio message. It says, "We've been hit by a plane. Tower 2, blah, 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 blah." And I'm saying, wait a minute. Say that again. Tower 2. And I said, okay. I can't accept that. I cannot reconcile or accept the fact that there's a possibility of a second plane hitting.
But at that point, I also, not only was everything kind of like rumbling, but there was this noise that sounded like a freight train, really, but it was coming from the sky. And I remember looking up and looking to my left because that's where the sound was coming from, and I was expecting it to be, I don't know, a helicopter or something, because the other building's on fire, so there's got to be people coming to rescue people. And what I saw was Flight 175, and it looked like it was going to hit the building that we were standing right in front of, and then it kind of like did this dipping turn like right at the last second, and then slammed into the tower that we had just come out of. Up until this point, I'd been thinking that it had been an accident, and it had to be the pilot had a heart attack because it was a clear blue sky, so you can't get lost or miss the building. So it was obviously a little Cessna type thing, and the pilot had a heart attack. But when I saw that massive plane come and like turn on its side and just go into the building. The concussion from that knocked me off my feet, and I was bigger then than I am now, so that's, you know, not an easy thing to do. But I was laying on the ground and looking up, and in my brain said, that was not an accident. And I got up and I started to move like I have never in my life moved before. I'm not built for speed.
Just then, this very handsome young fireman walked toward us, and he saw me in the doorway. He spotted me, and he looked at me and he said, "Lady, take your two friends, and I want you to go through the concourse, through tower number 5, which would lead you to Church Street. Once you get to Church Street, just go in that direction." He said, "Because look what's happened." And I looked out and I saw the plaza filled with steel and glass and concrete, and I thought, oh no. So I said, "Come on, Regina, come on." And just as I finished that statement, tower to his head, and I felt the ground shake under my feet, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like the earthquake. And I looked at this watch, and it was exactly 9:03.
I think when we got on the 60th floor was when the plane hit our building. And it shook, definitely felt the building shake. Now people are running down the stairs. There's coffee spilt on the staircase, trying to get down. And these two men looked at me and said, "If you want to see your son, we need to get out of here." And they literally, arm for arm, pulled me down those stairs till we got to the bottom. If it wasn't for them, I would never be here today.
But when that second, when the second tower was struck, that's when it really came over us. Like, it was one of those literally, oh shit moments. Are we dead? Am I having an out of body experience that I somehow know that I'm going to die today? And I don't want to.
In the time from I left the museum to the time that I arrived at the scene, there was another impact, which I was not aware of. So now the incident became twice as large. It was already enormous. I knew when I saw the impact, I knew there was going to be many, many deaths. I knew there was going to be many civilian deaths. I knew a lot of firefighters were going to die. I knew that when I saw it.
Got in the ambulance, backed out, started heading down Broadway, came around by Battery Park to come up West Side Highway again. And it was a sight I've never, ever experienced in my life. Tornado doesn't quite cut it. Earthquake really doesn't cut it either. It was just atrocious. There was things burning, there was things on fire, there were things in smoke, there were debris, things were all over the place. It made no sense. You're trying to, fathom this in your mind, and you can't, because this is nothing I've ever experienced. I was a volunteer firefighter in my local fire department, but I have never seen a scene like this. And at that point, I ran over someone's leg, foot all the way up to the hip. I knew it was the left leg just by the way it was positioned. And I turned to Jen at that point and I said, "I just ran over someone's leg." And there was kind of a disbelief in her face, and I said, "No, I just ran over someone's leg. It wasn't a mannequin. This was someone's leg."
We started going down West Street, and we're looking right at the North Tower. The people are jumping on North Tower like crazy. You could see where the plane went in on the north side. We were approaching the North Tower from the north side. I remember coming across a turnout coat laying in the street, and it looked like it had been cut to shreds, and it was covered with blood. And it had turned out, I believe it was Danny Surtham, 216, got hit with a jumper. And his company grabbed him and eventually took him to the hospital, but the coat was like laying there, like it looked like it exploded. And there was, you know, I don't want to say there were body parts all over, because it was just debris, and at that point, the bodies hitting the ground weren't. I told the guys, watch out, keep your head up so we don't get hit by a jumper. And I remember an aircraft tire on the street, giant aircraft tire. And I remember seeing debris and glass and stuff like that you see in an office, and body parts. I remember seeing a woman's calf from the knee down with a high heel shoe still on it. And it was just like, it was surreal. It was from here down. And a nice calf and a high heel pump on it. And it was just sitting there like a prop.
I was waiting there. You hear the young kids, you know, look at this, look at this. And it was the poor souls, you know, jumping. And I didn't want to look, because you knew that they were in their last seconds of life.
So many horrible things. There was jumpers coming around us. The ground was littered with body parts. It was pretty horrible. I was traumatized.
I was standing there and I'm looking outside, and it literally made no sense. I mean, my brain could not wrap itself around what it was seeing, and so my brain was saying things and stuff, you know, and that's really, it was like things that were falling, stuff that was falling, and it didn't make any sense. And it was the noises that my brain kind of was more focused on than what I was seeing, because I think I'm more of an oral person than a visual person. And suddenly I realized that, you know, I was seeing paper in the air, and I was seeing things crashing down and making these big crashing noises, and they were like on fire, and there was smoke. It was like things that made big crashing noises and things that made these like almost like big popping explosions. What I realized is that I was seeing pieces of the building, probably pieces of airplane, but at the time all I thought of was pieces of the building that were on fire. And then I realized that I was also seeing people. I know for me, that's when I started to that was the first time I panicked. I mean, flat out just panicked.
We just got caught up, and the people are chained and jumping and, you know, shaking your head like, don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. But in your head, you know, you're thinking, well, suffocate, burn to death, or jump. None of them are a good choice, but I don't think I would want to suffocate, and I don't think I would want to burn to death, so I would jump.
We would eventually end up out there, but now I'm on this outside looking in. You wonder what horrors people are experiencing. Your heart goes out to them. You can't even imagine what was probably going on. And I remember going up on this little hilly section of the city and looking out, and I could see the World Trade Center pretty big, and it was about that big to me. And I remember I held my hand out like this, and I put the World Trade Center in my hand. And I said, my God, if I had the power to just take those people and rescue them and do something for them from here, what are they experience over there? What I'm hearing on my radio over here, what is this? This is the most incredible thing that I have ever seen in my life.
We were about to go back into the building, and all hell broke loose.
This is an EMS worker. There's been a major collapse. We need additional units forthwith. Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. There's been a major collapse in the tower. The command center out here, everybody there was a major collapse. I'm in my rig right now.
The South Tower now is starting to implode. The fireball is following us, so we're running away from a fireball towards Financial One. The fireball hit Financial One, sheared a part of it completely off, and the area we were in, that section entombed us with all the debris that was coming off of the South Tower as it was imploding. At this point, we're buried alive. There's no way out.
Somewhere in proximity to the plaza of the South Tower, en route to entering the South Tower, when the building started to collapse. The building that was hit second collapsed first, so it went faster than the North Tower.
And being in Tower 2, now everybody thinks Tower 1 went. Tower 2 went first. Tower 2 went first, then Tower 1. And that was like mind-blowing. I mean, we thought it would be the other way around, and I knew something was wrong. It was a perfectly calm day, and all of a sudden I feel the building sway, and I hear, and if you've been in a skyscraper, when it sways, it sounds like, you know, a horror movie with the coffin opening and then the coffin closing. It's what it sounds like.
At that point was when the first tower, our tower, started to come down. And I thought, this is it, I'm gonna die here. So I started to run.
And then we get this great trembling thing, you know, going on. And it's building 2 coming down. I said to myself, my God, you know. And then it came over the radio, our radios, that, the building 2 came down. And we were ordered to evacuate.
Came back out, and I just started taking some pictures when the first of the buildings started to fall. And the person I know standing right next to me fell to the earth. And you could hear this noise that came from everyone, just this sound. And then it hit, and then you heard the rumble go through the subway. Actually, this one black fellow walked through the park and yelled, "The white man's world is coming down." And people turned to him and yelled, "Fuck you!" And it was like this moment where, because everyone was like half dead. There's this whole, you couldn't imagine how many people were dying right now, and it would be lost.
But I never thought it would collapse that way. I always, in my mind, pictured the building kind of toppling over. It was.
When we looked up, we saw the top of the tower rotate. We could see from the bottom, coming up this way, and we could see looks like what the floor was in this building. But as soon as we captured that image, it was totally obscured by this huge cloud that blanketed out everything. And then the only thing we had was this tremendous rumbling roar, like huge boulders, an avalanche coming down a rocky mountainside. And then you hear this thunder and loud sounds, and the building is starting to shake and vibrate. And the mind is racing, and I'm saying, all these thoughts instantaneously going through. But there's another part of the mind that's operating too. The back part of the mind is saying, hey, stupid, wake up. That building isn't here. So we turned around and said, I think it's time to get the hell out of here.
I watched the building, the first tower come down right from my school building after I knew my brother was there.
You heard the popping, and then you just saw the tower leaning, the south tower coming towards us, and we ran. It turned black as night. Everybody started gagging, vomiting, you know, trying to get your mask on. I put my mask on. It was full of whomever and whatever.
We watched on the screen as the first building tumbled down. And it was almost as if we were forgetful of where we were standing. It was as if we were watching it from somewhere else. It was surreal, like I can't even explain surreal. And as we're watching the building go down, our windows go and it goes pitch black outside. And the only way that I've ever described it was as if somebody had taken black magic marker or black Sharpie and covered all of our windows. You couldn't see.
I thought it was the end of the world because blackness covered the entire downtown Manhattan.
You could hear the sound of the upper floors, what we call pancaking. And at that moment, I believed that that was the end for me.
And one of the guys says, hey Cap, it's coming down. So I look up, and the top of the south tower tilted right over us. It appeared to be right over us. Before it went down, as it came down, it started to tilt south. It's where we were now. Like John said, it started to pancake, and it was almost in slow motion. You could almost see it going floor by floor, like poof, poof, poof. And it only took like a fraction of a second to see all this. It takes longer to tell about it. But you could actually see each floor just like slowly pounding. I remember tucking into behind the buttress and putting my arm over the guy next to me, might have been Owen, And I thought a couple things, and it was a split second. I thought, this is going to hurt. And there wasn't really time to pray. And I remember my last thing was, so this is how it ends. And that was it.
Even in my best day, I wasn't that fast a runner. And with all the gear on, I wasn't going to outrun the collapse of the building. There was no anticipation of me other than that I was sure I was going to die. I was expecting a big blast of energy. When I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking this building, 110-story building is collapsing in front of us. I said, I'm probably going to get blown to bits by the impact of it coming out. I felt all energy being drawn away from me. We were in some kind of void or in an area where the air was being sucked back in. There wasn't much sensation around you. I had a Scott mask on. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't hear anything. The only process that I had was the thoughts in my head. And I kind of thought that maybe this is it. Maybe I died. I don't know how long it was. It wasn't that long, but for a short period I was alone because we all got separated, and it was a very uncomfortable feeling. Shortly after that, I heard a familiar voice. I heard somebody calling for an axe, for a set of irons. And it was the captain calling Owen, and I know Owen had the irons, and I heard Owen respond. And I said, now I know I'm not alone now. I hear these guys.
We went to the North Bronx, and I remember it was pretty high, the Bronx, height-wise, looking down to the city. And we got there and went to the top of one of the buildings, and one of the towers had already collapsed. I could see the plume, and it looked so odd to me. Like, I know the city, and it just, I couldn't even believe what we were seeing.
Oh my God, you believe this is happening, man? It's down. Yeah? It just went down. The whole tower just went right down. Look at my arms, how much goosebumps are on me, dude. It exploded. It was a gigantic fucking explosion. And now I don't see the other tower. There's only one standing, isn't there? The one on the right's gone.
Our breathing was getting more raspy and more raspy and more raspy. And I remember saying to myself, you know, God, just take care of my family and my friends and whoever else is out there. Because we were pretty convinced at that point we were going to die. Because we know, especially with our training, that superheated air and a closed area does not hold oxygen very long. It didn't occur to me that we were still alive because I really thought we were dead. And I really resigned myself to the fact that we were going to die and be found standing up, all 30 of us.
And then all of a sudden, I hear people screaming. And then I see smoke. And then I see like a fireball come up a street. And then I'm feeling wind. And when I tell you this wind was like a tornado, people were starting to hold on to I had to literally hold on to a lamppost. And I couldn't see it from where I was. So I wasn't too sure what it was. And I see this man holding on to the lamppost. I had to hold on to it too because I couldn't stand up. It was like strong wind. And then I'm saying to myself, oh my God. And everybody's screaming, run! The smoke started coming more and more. And I just kept running. And then I'm saying, oh my God, I don't want to die. What is this? And then I just kept saying my prayers. I didn't realize how strong my faith was that day.
And you could see down the side street, we just run, you could start to see the blowback from the collapse going down to my peripheral vision. The side streets, you could start to see it go down. And then blackness and soot that you couldn't breathe. Normal smoke, you go up, even if it gets thick, you can breathe it for a while. Couldn't breathe it at all. I was still saying the top of the building fell off. I was like, nah, it's just the top. The top came down, because my last glimpse was it tilting, and I'm thinking, the top 30 floors came off, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the guys were telling me, this thing goes, no, the whole building came down. The whole building came down. So we're waiting. It was still pitch black outside. And we finally ventured out. It was like snowing outside. It was just white. It was a white haze, and it was eerily quiet. My handy-talkie, I hadn't heard a thing since then. I tried to get on handy-talkie and say 220 to command, 220 to, I changed stations, nothing. Nothing.
Everything was gray. The New York City firefighters who were there, whatever people were still around, vehicles, buildings, everything gray. And you had this living color as you were coming in. As you got closer and closer and closer to the scene, everything just turned into this gray, which gave it a very, very surreal appearance,
But now everything I see, there is no more Technicolor. It is gray. Everything is this ashy gray. I'm covered in it. And I walked up another block, and then I met the captain of the PAPD police precinct at World Trade Center. And he's all disheveled. His tie is off. He's got a short sleeve shirt on. He's missing his hat. His hair is all filled with dust, and he looks like a white man now. We came up with each other, and we just grabbed each other in a welcoming embrace. Tony, how are you? Vic, are you okay? Yeah, fine. So
we got outside, and you couldn't see a thing. Everything was white gray. You couldn't see but maybe 10 feet in front of you. At this point, we had so much garbage in our mouth. We was just trying to wash it out and get it off our faces and away from our eyes. And it just didn't seem like it wanted to come off. It was caked. It was so caked onto us. And it was just like a kid. When you played in mud and it dried on your skin, it just wasn't coming off. I remember her and I just looking at each other and saying, we got to get out of here. So we picked up our bags and we went outside.
Now at this point there's ash all over. We finally get to triage, and they take us in and they take us to NYU, and they treated us like we were queens.
We were talking about the end of the world. We were talking about, is this in the Bible? It was stuff that you wouldn't think you'd ever talk about in a regular conversation when you meet people. Stuff that's going through our heads is totally different, and it's weird, and it's strange, and it's very uncomfortable, it's scary, but at the same time, we were curious. People were walking like zombies. People didn't know what to do, people didn't know what to say. We were all in a daze. I can't explain to you, something you'd see in a movie, something that wasn't normal, something that no one understood. We were all confused. It's like we didn't know what to do. But this is what we had to do. We had to keep walking. We wanted to get somewhere, but we couldn't quite get there. This lady came up to me. She goes, "You better pray." Like it was the end of the world. It was spooky. It was eerie. I'm saying, oh my God. Then you see people in the street, and they're kneeling down, and they're literally making the sign of the cross and praying, and I'm going, oh my God. I'm saying to people, I says, you have to get out of here. You have to get out of here. This is what I was telling them.
Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. The one building is still standing, and it is so hard to describe it. To watch this tower just, go down, and then literally, it was that fast. The windows just, and I don't know if you know that feeling or if you can imagine that. It was like a vacuum seal. And I think what started freaking us out was when we could smell like the soot coming up the elevator shafts. And we're on the 19th floor. But we stayed in the conference room and we watched. We watched. And we watched people on Water Street and Main Lane just literally jump out of their vehicles and run down the street.
I saw people covered in gray, and they were just walking with a deer in the headlights kind of look in their eyes. They all had cell phones to their ears, and the first thought I had was, don't they know what's going on? Why are they on their phones, not realizing that they were trying to contact their loved ones to tell them they were okay?
It just was the wave of gray, dusted people coming back, and then the crush of people from the city trying to find someone. Most people were walking around with dead cell phones on their ears and talking to no one. And there was a lineup over a block long to get to the payphone, because the payphones, even though there's hardly any left, the payphone still worked. So that's how people were. And I remember actually walking by and someone getting a hold of somebody and hearing that fabulous sound of happy tears, and it affected the 20 people behind them, that they all had hope, where everyone looked like zombies beforehand.
I looked at these buildings on fire and I watched. What I saw was blue, and I remember telling my friend, I see blue. What had happened is the South Tower number 2, my building where I worked, had collapsed. But it was so incomprehensible. In fact, the entire event was so beyond one's ability to conceive such a thing that even though the building collapsed, and I saw it collapse, and I saw the blue sky where the building had once stood, I could not process this in my brain. I could only say, I see blue.
Can anybody hear me? I'm a civilian. I'm trapped inside of one of your fire trucks underneath. I collapsed. That just happened. Stand by. There's people close to you. I can't breathe much longer. Please save me. I'm in a can't-be truck.
And as I crawled deeper in, everything started to shake, and I got trapped. Pitch black. Stuff came in behind me, and I'm stuck in this hollow, and I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, screaming. No one heard me, nothing, and I really thought I was going to die. I thought, this is it. But I went through that horrible panic, confined space, and I was trained for confined space. I remember I prayed to God, and I wasn't a religious guy or nothing, but I guess that's the time, like, this is kind of it. Please, don't let me suffocate here. Take me quick, and somehow let my kids know that I was doing my best down here. That was like, came to my mind. And just when I said that, I mean, this is my life-changing moment while I was there, I had the gift of holding my 3 infant babies in my arms. Like, I actually, like, we're sitting here right now, naked, beautiful, my 3 kids, a boy and 2 girls, and the smell of the baby smell was on them. And that was so unique for me because there was nothing but the horrible, putrid smell of death at Ground Zero. It was, anyone who you're going to talk to will recall, of all the things, that smell. So now I'm smelling babies and holding them and seeing them. So to me it was real, and God was with me, and I realized for the first time He doesn't come from far away. He's inside of us, and you just ask Him to be with you, and He's there. And I said, look, I'm ready to go, but if you allow me to stay, I'm making deals now, I promise to dedicate my life to serving you. Whatever that is, that was it, came out of me. Something told me that I had to go further down. I don't know why. It's the opposite reaction of where I should go. And it kind of illuminated, go this way. And I kept crawling down and feeling my way over and under and through. So I eventually made my way south, and I came up under the lobby of the Deutsche Bank building, which is one of the buildings they just took down, across the street. I have no idea how I got there. I came up through the sub-basement and opened the side door, and all the lights of Ground Zero were shining, and I just looked. I said, thank you.
We're on 57th and West Side Highway. Let us go down west and get back to you, let you know what's going on. Fort Charlie, the operations post, the command post is going to be set up on West Street. They're moving completely out to West Street. That's correct. I'm in contact with Chief Ian and Commissioner Ian, and that's where we're going to start moving out of further collapse zone.
We got to the corner, but we had just run down where I'd seen the debris coming. And when we got there, I think we're still deciding whether or not we should do a search or we should head to the water. A little gray there, but I knew we wanted to get over to the other side of the financial area. And with that, we felt the rumbling again. And that time we kind of just knew that was the North Tower coming down. I think one of the guys mentioned it. That's the North Tower coming down. And we headed down that street that we were on and ducked into another building a little later than this one, and waited for the same thing, blackness, waiting for it to end. And that was just the start of it. It it was stuff like that for the next, I don't know how many hours or minutes. I have no idea. It seemed like an eternity. It seemed like running from one place to another. Just debris all over the place, like snow, and quiet. Yeah, that's how the morning went.
We walked to West Street. I guess we got a block down, and you could hear the rumbling. And we ducked into a hotel. And then you could see just a cloud of black again. And people asking, what do we do? I told one lady, cover your baby up and get on the Staten Island ferry and go west. Get out of the city, don't come back. Leave as soon as you can. From what I understand, it registered as an earthquake somewhere in the United States at 3 something.
We were all in stages of shock, and Owen Carlock then suggested that if the South Tower came down, that the North Tower was going to collapse also. It was a very wise thought. I think we were in 75 West Street when the North Tower collapsed. And we knew what it was. We knew what happened. I was in shock. I was in total shock. It was my worst fear. Happened. It happened, and I was shocked.
We started moving towards where our sector was, and the ground started shaking again, and all of a sudden it sounded like train, tornado, bomb, all at once. It was just overwhelming. The second tower had just fallen, and we were running for our lives again.
Well, I got that look, and he's about ready to say something, and as soon as he opens his mouth to start to say anything, there's this tremendous snap. You could hear this pop. It's like somebody took the steel beam and just snapped it in half. And instinctively, I don't know what it was, but it's instinctive. He ran west towards the river, and I ran north up West Street. You know, I was 67 years old at that time. I could run, but I'm not very quick anymore, you know? And so as you start to run, you begin to feel heat, wind, and debris, and almost instantly you're covered in this cloud. So as that cloud begins to cover you, you put my jacket up over my head, my radio hand, I'm holding the jacket up, and I'm trying to keep it tight around me, in some ways trying to use it as a filter, because this cloud that we're looking into is not one of those clouds that you fly through. But I'm still getting blown. But I'm not being pushed with this tremendous downbeat, because those winds probably are up to around 120 miles an hour or more. I know stories of people that I've talked with that say they were picked up and blown across West Street and thrown into a portion of the World Financial Center. Well, when they saw the second tower collapse, my daughter knew right away that I was dead, because that's who Daddy is. He's staying there to get his job done.
And I was about 30 yards, maybe less, from the building. Did I hear the building start to crack? And I looked up, and I saw it. I saw it starting to come down. And I started to run. And I said, I can't outrun this thing. You know, I'm thinking in my mind, of course, I can't outrun this thing. And I jump underneath the fire truck that was there. I had no anticipation that I would survive. I had no thoughts that this building falls down on that fire truck. I'm not surviving. There's no possibility. I'm going to get crushed anyway, you know. So of course it didn't surprise me when I was unconscious. And then it came to. At first, I thought I was dead. It was a very spiritual experience. Rather beautiful. It was just light. Clear, bright, white.
When the building collapse. My husband collapsed on his job because he knew my routine. He knew that there was no way that that was the building, the timing that I would be alive.
And I just kept thinking that I'm gonna die alone with not my family not around me. That was probably the worst, to think that I couldn't even say goodbye to anybody, or where am I gonna go? What's gonna happen to me? It was an awful feeling.
Everyone's like screaming when the second tower starts coming down, and we're at the conference room and the second tower starts coming down, and all of a sudden that's when like everyone starts crying, I want to get out of here, I have to go home, I have to call my parents, nobody knows where I am, I just need to go. And that's when it was like, okay everybody, there isn't anything we can do except for think about moving forward, and this is what we're going to do.
Coincidence, whatever, but it was, again, it couldn't have been more than a minute that I had been home and like looking at this. It was 10:28 on my cable box, and that's when one came down. And when it was about halfway down is when everything kind of dawned on me, and I kind of like went, wait a minute, where's Tower 2? And then, you know, one crumbled, and that's when I completely lost it, because the only thing that I could conceive of was that I ran away and everybody I know is dead.
I noticed on the TV that the towers had collapsed. And that was the first time I knew that the second tower was hit and that they collapsed. And at that moment, I figured there were at least 10,000 people who were dead. At least 10,000 people, probably more.
And the only thing everybody did basically was look at the TV and watch the towers come down. And that was, I think, the worst thing. I didn't even know they fell. I didn't even know they fell.
It really shook my confidence was the fact that I didn't think the building was collapsing. I really didn't give any thought to the building collapsing. I know there was staff that knew the building was going to collapse, that they realized that this can only survive so long before it collapsed, and we're fighting time here. We were in such a lucky window to be where we were when that happened, when the South Tower collapsed. And the South Tower collapsed first, even though it was hit second, because it was hit lower. So there was more weight above it than the North Tower. The North Tower was hit higher. Most of the survivors from the South Tower had self-evacuated because they saw the North Tower get hit, and they were there for the '93 bombing, so they knew to get the heck out. The people in the North Tower that survived were below the impact point, so they got out. The firemen in the South Tower did not survive because theirs collapsed right away.
I'm not an engineer, but I've seen enough of the reports and stuff. And it's not minutes. I mean, you're talking a long time that the buildings withstood two fully laden aircraft filled with jet fuel. What we described it was like a blowtorch effect. You had elevator shafts going up 110 stories with fuel dropping down, and so you have basically a blast furnace going on. The impact of the aircraft, that's like a bomb going off, the jet fuel burning at ridiculous temperatures. And we saw the steel down there. I mean, it was warped and bent and
I looked to the left, and the skyline was all smoke and dust, and it was a black smoke I've never seen before. I looked to the right, and there was a Statue of Liberty, and for some reason that comforted me. That was the last thing I remember.
As I was driving north on the Jersey Turnpike, I grabbed my camera and I was videotaping the skyline, because the first thing that hit me was that the towers weren't there. Since I was a kid and driving up North Jersey with my parents to visit relatives, the Twin Towers were always there. And all of a sudden they're gone. Just gone. When I first saw the destruction, I couldn't believe it. It was just blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks of girders and steel and concrete, pulverized glass. There were fires everywhere, poking up through the steel. The smoke was so thick with not only toxic smoke, but glass particulate. And it would actually shine as it was floating by. And at that point, we didn't have masks.
The devastation was just, it's not something you expect to see in your hometown, let alone this country.
I did come in on that gray, and that was the predominant thing for me. It was featureless, it was lifeless, it was hollow. It was like a post-apocalyptic movie.
At the World Trade Center, there was nothing. Everything was pulverized. There was pieces of steel, there was pulverized white stuff that was gooey. And the way you found stuff is you picked your hands through it and you smelled it to see if it smelled like rotten meat. And if it did, you'd put it in a red bag and you'd send it to get checked, to get DNA checked, you know, to see if it was somebody or not. And where I wasn't pulling out legs or anything like that. I was picking out parts of goo that was surrounded with like white chalk. There was nothing there. There was no telephones, which always survive. There was no desks. There was no glass. Everything was pulverized. It was strange. It's hard to explain to people what it actually looked like. And there was just piles of it, mounds of it, and acres of it, and depth. Yeah.